Welcome to the Lap Around TeamPulse for version 2011 R2 Service Pack 1. The biggest part of this release is the new customer feedback portal, as well as the updated feedback center. So we'll go ahead and start with that today. We'll start actually taking a look, and this is where we'll begin our requirements management from. So I'll go ahead and just open up Project 6. And we'll jump over to our new feedback center. So immediately the change you'll notice is that there's no more feature requests as well as feedback or idea management. It's all been condensed into one screen. And inside of this screen, now you have the option to create your new custom views, so you can edit columns. For example, if you're interested in knowing iterations and possibly who was last modified by and the number of likes. I can take this view and from the drop-down menu either save it as my own or create a new view which I can share with all my team members. Alright, let's go ahead now and open up a requirement. So this particular feature request that we received is team leaders need to be able to see and edit roles for each of their team members. I can add tags, which this will follow it through its entire development process. So I can go ahead and enter a tag. Maybe we'll call this tag needed, for example, and a part of version 3. This tag can actually follow this particular requirement as it moves all the way through from a user story perspective, as well as a bug. You can all tag it to make it really simple to return from our backlog. As well, I now have the option to link the requirement directly from the feedback center. So I can go ahead and use my quick linking tool to either define a bug or a story from here. And go ahead and click enter, and now this requirement is stubbed out and created. As well, I can take any item that is in the portal and make it visible or hide it from the users. I can jump directly to the portal view, and I can see my votes and dislikes directly from here. The type, idea, feedback, feature request, and problem are default. You can actually add and create your own types to make the portal more useful and deliver more value to your end users. Another good part is I can specify areas as well as an iteration as to when this might be done. The statuses, I can communicate back to my team members, and as well as give a relative size and put a source in. The description that you see here is what the users will see in the portal. This description right here is internal, so that will not be shared with the end user that's working in the portal. As well, any comments can be traced from here and will be displayed in the portal as well. You can link to stories as you saw, defects, bring in external attachments to further clarify the requirement, and links. Alright, so let's go ahead now and take a look at the feedback portal. I can initiate the portal by clicking on and this will open up a new tab in my browser in this case, and will actually display the portal for me. The feedback portal allows us to filter ideas, feedback, feature requests, problems, and any of your items. As well, the items that you've created and items that you follow. By default, all TeamPulse users will have a portal license. However, your end user customers falls into a new licensing model for the portal, which is unlimited seats server-based licensing. So they will have to create their own account either using their Windows credentials, or they can also use forms-based authentications by creating a login. I can vote on any items. I can also open up any of these items here to view all the information. So for example, this is our team leaders requirement that we just looked at inside of the TeamPulse new feedback center. And as you can see, I can go ahead and create comments and post them. And I'll say, is there a master account? And I'll submit this comment. This information will be posted inside of TeamPulse. I can also create new requirements quite simply by searching to ensure that it does not already exist. So I'll go ahead and go back to the home. And I'm actually going to go ahead and actually create a new requirement here, and we'll call this Facebook login. So I can search, and if it finds no topics, then I can actually submit a new one. And I'll call this a feature request and provide some more detailed information. I'll click on submit, and this will create the new feature request that I put in place, and I can receive all the information from it. For example, the status that it is. So if I went and changed this to update, committed, rejected, you could see that information, who it was last updated by, the likes and dislikes, and it's listed under the recently new and the your items. You can also go back to home and filter this information as well. So as you saw earlier, I can enter search existing and it will return back the values. I can see what was recently updated, the newest, and the most liked. So this will give your customers a lot of value, as they will be able to provide you information, feature requests, and it's completely bidirectional. So you can actually update them as to the statuses of content. So as things are changing, you can push information back to them and possibly gather additional information, and most importantly, you can actually go ahead and have a full pipeline, a full communication with your customers, which is critically important to the overall health of your project. Alright, so let's go ahead now and jump into TeamPulse and continue working with our team leaders can edit requirement here. So I want to go ahead and actually reopen this. You'll see we have the comments that I entered, timestamped. I can delete a comment. So if the comment maybe not appropriate or not for the right particular context of this particular requirement, then we can go ahead and just delete it out. I have my story, and this is what we'll work with today. We'll begin working with this particular edit team members role story. As you can see here, again, we can add tags. So if I need the needed, and I also need the version 3, I'll go ahead and add those to it. And from the description, we follow the simple Microsoft template for the actual description. As a type of user, I want to accomplish some goal for some reason. Now the great part about TeamPulse is traceability, something that we've always had since day one, and we want to be able to provide easily traceable items. So for example, the type of user, we can select from our persona catalog by selecting persona, seeing if the individual exists within our system as a persona. Now remember, the persona is really the individual that will be interacting with the software. So essentially who we're building the software for. In this case, we do have, it's actually a manager. And I'm going to go ahead and link this. So what I've essentially done is I've taken this particular requirement and linked it to an individual. Now this is going to give us a couple of great options. One, we'll be able to see this individual. Secondly, we'll see what other interactions he has, what other points, touch points within the application he's working with. And most importantly, we'll get to know his objectives and pains, so be able to build the right software for him. The goal is really going to drive the requirement. So the goal is I want to be able to edit my team member roles. Why? What's the reasoning behind it? Why would I want to do that? Well, so that I can manage their requirements. And possibly, might be able to want to link this to another story. So again, I can just use my quick linking tool to select a story and stub out a new requirement if needed. So if you actually find yourself with an epic, you could quickly decompose it by creating a new requirement and specifying whether it's a child or the parent and so forth. You also have other relationships like affected by effects, predecessor, related, and successor. I can apply properties to my requirement, and this is going to really help me filter and really update my backlog. So for example, I can specify an area where it might fall, and this is probably going to be part of user management. Which iteration? I'm not sure, so I'll leave it the way that it is for the time being. I can assign it to an individual, so I'm going to go ahead and assign it to myself. If we had team support, if we had teams, then we can go ahead and add the individual team here. In this case, we won't. The status will leave as new at the present moment. And for the estimate, it's the level of effort associated with it. So lots of teams will have sessions like planning poker to determine how big the requirement is and what the level of effort that it will take to accomplish it. So we'll say in this case, it's a 5-point story. And from the priorities perspective, we can specify again any number. My recommendation has always been just add 1,000 to it once you begin. Make it the lowest of your items, or 10, or whatever that number is, but make sure it's the lowest. And then from there, update the priorities. Now, one of the greatest part about TeamPulse is, as I mentioned earlier, we can go ahead and actually specify and help manage our backlogs by applying specific classes and priorities to our work items or requirements. So in the drop-down menu, I can specify in the priority class field whether this is a must-have, should-have, could-have, or won't-have. A lot of people actually recognize this as the Moscow method. The thought behind this is that I can interact with my customers, because typically everything is going to be a must-have. They're putting things into a backlog, which is really just a wish list. But it's really a way to interact with them. So we know two things. Time and money are fixed assets. So we can add additional money at a cost, right? We can add additional time again at a cost. So we can increase what we can do if we add additional resources like developers. Lots of times you don't have that luxury. So we're really boxed into what we can provide with the current requirement. So, for example, being able to create a team member might be important. The ability to edit a team member might not be necessarily important. Now, the customer can help us with that, so we can go ahead and ensure that we align the vision. So in this case, I'm going to say this is really a must-have. We have to be able to have team members edit the roles. We can't be tapping our IT department to go in and manually change the priorities and so forth. So this is really definitely a must-have. What is it going to do from a business perspective? Is it really going to make us, is it going to save money? Is it different? Is it a spoiler? Is it really a table stake? Well, I would argue it saves money. We no longer have to tap additional resources to help us update and modify the roles. From a complexity standpoint, think about this as not just in the lines of code, but also how difficult is it really to comprehend the ability to edit profiles? Well, I'm going to say this is somewhat simple. It's easy. I can edit the profile and select from available functionality. So I get that. It makes sense to me. From a coding perspective, there might be some complexity in there. So I won't say it's simple. We'll say it's a little somewhat simple. And from a maturity standpoint, I've always thought about this, and I've always recommended to teams that you should really just think about the maturity as understanding throughout the entire organization. Right? Just because you just got the requirement, you know what it is, you can specify it as mature. That might not necessarily be the case. Because remember, the user story is small, and it's meant to be very concise. Keep the feature to its smallest level. The thought behind that is that we can also get other people's perceptions, the warehouse individuals, needs, customer service needs, accounting needs, and that's going to really help us determine how mature this requirement is. So we'll just assume that this is a mature requirement, as it's been around the organization. We have a good understanding of it. And based on all the criteria, how certain are we that we can deliver this particular function or feature within the period time allowed, which is going to be that sprint? I'll say what's somewhat certain. Team members can choose to be notified when others make changes to this. So for example, I can go ahead and check this box off. And if another developer comes in and makes a change to it, another team member comes in and makes a change to it, then I can go ahead and be notified via email that a change has taken place. I can also create new tasks from here. So I can go ahead and specify a new task, and this is going to be, say, create roles with an application. I'm going to go ahead and specify the estimate for this, and maybe I'll say this is going to take 8, possibly probably it'll take me about 12 hours worth of work. And if I run into issues, it might take me as long as 15. So this is a pretty big requirement. And I might want to consider actually taking this and being able to actually decompose it into multiple requirements. I can update the remaining time and work completed directly from here, and create all my tasks. I can also define acceptance criteria. So I can actually create the definition of done for this. So we'll go ahead and open this up. And some of you familiar with BDD will be familiar with this as Gherkin, which is just a way to help you really determine the definition of done, or what we call this as complete. And it's made to be simple and easily worked on by most individuals. So anyone on the team can go ahead and here and specify the acceptance criteria. We can define given, when, then. Right? So given as a precondition, when I take an action, then I receive an expected result. That allows non-developers, maybe on the business side of the house, to give us their definition of done. Also be able to link stories, bugs, impediments such as risk and issues, and feedback. So we actually getting content from outside here, as you saw, because we linked this original requirement. External attachments and links are also available here as well. Alright, so that's our requirement. TeamPulse also allows us to actually import requirements. So if we have requirements in Excel or another system, if we can export it into CSV, then we can import it into TeamPulse. You also have the ability to create the views just like we did in the Feedback Center. You can actually go ahead and create views that you can share with your team. That'll cut down on a lot of time, as you're not wasting time going back and forth with your team member to look at this column, apply this filter. You can set it and send that out to everybody. If you choose to, you can also export your stories list here into either CSV, HTML, Excel, Word, or PDF. Now the great part about the application is that you'll find a lot of this functionality across a lot of the areas of TeamPulse. You'll be able to create custom views in bugs, planning, obviously the ideas and feedback center, and be able to export that data as well across those. So good standardization across the entire system. Our persona catalog will actually display all the individuals within our team, within our application that we will be interacting with. So for example, an employee, these are specific needs that he has. Manager's needs, HR, and so forth. So you can see these are the stories that they're interacting with. We can specify roles if we needed to for the specific persona, but this will show them all the individuals that are within our persona catalog. Now the great part here is you'll notice that we give them a little bit of life, right? We actually go ahead, we can specify an image for them to bring them up and give them a little more life. So for a customer standpoint, maybe he's this individual here, brings them money. We could define the objectives and also give them a name, give them a little more life. Alright, so next let's go ahead and move over to our areas and iterations. If you're familiar with Team Foundation Server, this is probably going to seem very, very straightforward to you. The thought behind areas and iterations is an area is just a group. It could be either feature driven by the application, like we have it set up here, vacation management, calendar, user management, and so forth. Or it can be something like development or QA. It's up to you to decide the areas, and whatever works for your team, you'll be able to create in here. Alright. Let's go ahead and now continue and move over to planning. So one of the greatest features introduced in the last version of TeamPulse was the idea to be able to drag and drop and set priorities for your backlog. Lots of times, because the vision changes, the requirements will change. We all know this. What we originally started doing is not the same, and that could change frequently. So we always recommend, when working with teams, that you go ahead and generate and clean and do backlog grooming. So go ahead and just double check to ensure that the requirements that you're looking for still align with the original vision, or still align with the current vision, I should say. So for example, multi-language support became something really important. Let's say our competitors released it. So I'm going to go ahead and say, well, this is really important. This actually needs to be either second from the top, because show vacation history is still very important. Or if I needed to, I could push it all the way to the top as well. To make the job of actually working with the backlog simpler, so you don't actually have to open each requirement, we created a preview pane that actually allows you to go through these requirements and make all the necessary changes. For example, adding it to an individual, teams, statuses, estimates, and so forth. So all the changes can quickly be done from here without having to actually go into the application, open up the individual requirements. So it's a quick way to step through and continue grooming and maintaining your backlog to ensure that the ordered list matches with the vision. Okay, so now let's go ahead, and since we've really kind of prioritized our backlog a bit here, we'll go ahead and actually come back to a planning screen and look at our scheduling screen. So in the new version of TeamPulse that just came out, one of the things we got rid of was what we call the LCAM. And what it did, it was actually providing a way to actually space out indent, outdent iterations, create new ones, delete them directly from the screen. So a lot of feedback we got from our customers that it was rather difficult to work with. So what we did is we moved it up to here. So you can create a new iteration and create your indents or outdents from here. Create the links. So for example, if I highlighted that, I can go ahead and create the links. Delete and set your setting defaults, which is critical. So for example, if your iterations are running 14 days, you can go ahead and specify them from here. So let's go ahead and quickly create a new iteration. Now you'll notice a couple of things here. Iteration 5 falls below iteration 4. So what we want to do is we'll want to go ahead and ensure that it's actually part of this project. And the next thing I want to do is actually, if I come here, is specify the predecessor. So iteration 5 happens after iteration 4. So now the timeline will align. So now that we've actually added that additional iteration, let's go ahead and begin by planning the iteration. So we'll need to actually plan the iteration. We'll need to look at our backlog items and add them to the actual iteration. So lots of teams will get together and sit through and determine A, how big the requirements are, updated from the original requirement, as well add them to the iteration. So to add an item to the iteration, I'm going to go ahead, select the one I want to plan, which is going to be iteration 5, and add each item. So I want to go ahead and specify the estimate. So I'll say that for this particular requirement, it was maybe a 12-point story. And the great part too is you also have a preview pane here, so to make the job of actually updating and creating the estimates much simpler. Now you'll remember we can actually create the tasks for these individual stories directly from the story view. As well, I'll show you in a bit how we can create them from the card views, and I'll also show you next how to decompose actual requirements into tasks. So we're going to decompose into work. Alright, so let's go ahead and add this story as well. Okay, So next, let's go into decomposing into work. So in this screen here, we'll actually take the physical requirements and begin stubbing out the tasks necessary to finish it. So let's go ahead and select iteration 5. I'm going to select my requirement here, show vacation history, training calendar, or my multi-language support. And I'm going to create a new task. And this task will be update DB schema. We'll start with that. Again, I'll specify the amount of time I believe it'll take me. And we always recommend that you estimate your requirements in level of effort and estimate your task in time. And I'll set up one more screen and we'll select, we'll add a Castilian dictionary. This one should be rather quickly because the files already exist. But we could run into some problems, so I'm going to go ahead and increase that time there, as I'm not sure how we'll be able to handle some of the specific letters in Castilian that don't exist in the default keyboard layouts and so forth. Alright, so then I started decomposing into work. Now coming back to this Castilian dictionary, well, I'm actually assuming there could be a potential risk there, as I'm not sure, right? As you can see, I have a really big gap between the probable and the pessimistic view. And the reason being is I'm really unsure of what might happen by going to different language support and how we'll deal with keyboards. So I'm going to go ahead and actually create this. Because again, I'm not sure. And I have one to assess. So as you can see, when I created a new one, this little icon appears up here, lets me know, hey, by the way, you have to assess one of your risks. So we'll do that right now. We'll go ahead and assess the risk. So I'm going to click on the requirement. I'm going to say it's kind of high. I wouldn't say it's critical, but I'll say it's high. Again, preview panes. So standardization, as you see, I can go ahead and select the preview pane here. And if I want to, I'll maybe add the same description that's up here. And before assigning it to someone, I'll mark it as assessed. So when I mark the item as assessed, it will leave this screen here, the unassessed risks, and be entered into a sequenced listing. So I can go ahead and determine up or down what's more important, what's less important, which ones I want to deal with first. So I want to deal with how language support will affect you. I think that's really a risk I need to look at. So I'm actually going to go ahead and move it up. The other thing I actually want to do from this particular risk here is I actually want to go ahead and assign it to an individual team member to work with. So I'm going to take this, and I can go about it two ways. I can go ahead and assign it to him or her by selecting the Assign To field here. I can also click on the Assign button here and look at my sequence list and assign a specific requirement to a team member, or a specific risk, I should say, to a team member. So I'll select this requirement and I'll add it to myself. Now you'll notice that inside of here there's some numbers. It means that I have three tasks, 3 stories, currently no bugs assigned to myself. So now it's gone ahead and assigned this particular risk to me. Now the risks themselves, well, a few things. The resolution. This is critical. You can also tag items. So again, we can stick to the same thing, as that these are all being tracked together. We can tag them. Maybe we can even create a tag called important for fire, for management review. So this tag will be important, as we'll be able to actually tag the items across the board and actually add a task for management requirements. So something that management needs to review. The resolution is where we will enter what we did to determine what this is when we're done. Now this is critical because we'll be able to take these resolutions and aggregate them across the board, and as other team members run into these risks, they can search TeamPulse, and if they do find the particular risk somewhere, they'll easily be able to address it. They won't have to actually do a lot of research on their own. They'll be able to actually do it directly from here. Stories. You can actually link any stories. So what I'll do is I'm going to see if I can find our Castilian support. And remember, we can apply filters by either selecting the area, even possibly the iteration. This will make it really simple to find. Multi-language support. And I'm going to relate this particular risk to the story. Alright, so that's risks, and issues is really similar. It'll be done the same way. The only difference really between the risk and the issue is that the risk can become an issue, and the issue will have benefits. The benefit of determining how to fix an issue is critical, because team members will now be able to research that data again, and if they find a particular issue that's already been taken care of, it'll save them time, because they won't have to go and find the resolution themselves. Alright, next I wanted to cover bugs. As we take this requirement along the way, we start developing it, and we run into some defects. Never happens, right? We've never run into defects. So, as you can see, it lets us know that we have 2 defects we need to triage. And as you can see here, we have 1 critical item. And I actually want to go ahead and I'll say it's marked as triaged. So we have a blocking issue, and as you can see here, I'll go ahead and possibly even tag it again. I can read the description, look at the steps to reproduce it, and again you have full rich text control here in all these fields, so you'll be able to actually create this list here. I can create a definition of done for this bug. So what is this done fixed? Again, I can assign it to an individual, so I'll go ahead and assign it to myself again. And I'm going to mark this as triaged. We've determined that it truly is a defect. It's something that we need to work with. So I'll go ahead and move this to the top. This is the most important thing I want to work with on because it's a blocking issue. Right now, we're stuck. Alright, so let's go ahead now and really go into now what we call the how. So part of being in the how is we found a little defects here. A lot we've been talking about recently has been the what, right? The vision, the requirement, some of the planning. Now let's go into the actual execution of it. And TeamPulse really gives each individual great support for that. So I'm going to go ahead and look at my perspective. Right. So TeamPulse, and this was new in a couple releases ago, but it keeps getting better as we add best practices and improve the performance of the application. You start getting a lot more benefit from this. So for example, I'm actually interested in looking at iteration 5 now. As you can see, show me work that has not been started. So a lot of my content is new. I can see work that's in progress and work that's been completed. So I'm actually going to go ahead and say I can change the item directly from here. It'll show me if any best practices are being broken. So I can go ensure that I go ahead and correct them to ensure overall success. It's not there to be a governor, but just to give you any assistance, especially if you're new to an application and you might have forgot something small, but that could be critical. I also have my own personal task board. And in my personal task board, I can go ahead, apply filters. I can filter items by tags, by area. I can also apply grouping. So I don't want to show any grouping whatsoever. And these are fully drag and droppable. Also, as I mentioned earlier, you can create the task from the requirement itself, from the decompose into work screen, and if you want to, directly from the story card view. So I'm actually going to go ahead and add my task from here. So I'm going to call this task training calendar. I'll specify the amount of time probable, and possibly pessimistic. It might take as much as 6. And the description here. And there you go. I can actually take the requirement and create the task for it directly from this particular screen, making it really simple to stay within one screen. And this is my view. I can also view other team members' views. And for an overall perspective, I can actually take a look at my entire story list. And again, apply filters. Specify grouping as assigned to team area and so forth. And this gives me a good overall sense as to where I am with a project. So we have 29 stories for this particular project. And if I take a look at this, it's a nice visual way to understand, hey, a lot of content is new, some stuff's to prove, a lot of stuff is committed, and some stuff is done. That makes me feel pretty good, right? It's the beginning of the project. This is what it should look like. If further down the line it's getting towards the end of the project, then this might make me start raising some questions as to what's going on. How come a lot of stuff is new? How come a lot of stuff is not done yet? My favorite view, though, has to be the overall task board. So you actually can view the entire task for the entire project for all users. So I'll go ahead and specify this filter here. And this will give me a good perspective of everything that we need to do task-wise. For 29 stories, see, a lot of stuff is done. Some stuff's in progress. And again, fully drag and droppable fields. I can also go through the system, and if I find a task that's not assigned to somebody, I can just go right into it and add myself to it. For those of you who prefer a more grid style view to apply filters, we also provide you with a progress grid. This will show us the iteration that we select in a grid view. And again, you can export the content, edit the columns, apply the filters necessary to view the overall progress of your stories in a grid style view. The overall team dashboard is actually showing us the overall progress of the project, and it gives us status histories, iteration burndowns, overall project timeline, and overall iteration. So let's go ahead and maybe select iteration 1. Let's see what happened then. So our capacities were approximately 192 points. We were at 160, so right in the middle of the minimum and maximum there. The iteration takes place, you can see from the dates itself when it took place. It was a 14-day iteration, and it shows us the overall project. So traditionally, this is what we would see. We see the points being here, and as stuff starts to get completed, then it starts to drop down. We have a What's New field in TeamPulse, gives us updated information. Individual team member project, or progress I should say. So you can see what each team member did, and the number of points, and also stories. Alright, so now let's actually move into our analysis section of TeamPulse. One of the greatest parts about the application is the View Best Practices Analyzer. This is unique to TeamPulse, and the great function of it is that you can actually use it maybe when you're grooming your backlog is a good time to analyze your project and look for anomalies. For example, you might have work in a previous iteration, and maybe the work is done. You just forgot to update the application, or possibly you guys missed something and it was completely missed, overseen, and things that can happen. I mean, those are just, we're all humans. We can make simple mistakes like that. So this will actually help us catch those little mistakes, and just let us know. Just send us a little bit of information. Say, hey, by the way, you have a lot of content that is not done. You have some stories in the current iteration that have no estimates, so we don't know how big they are, but yet we've committed them. So it's a good way to help overall project health and just help your team succeed. Alright, so let's go ahead and now take a look also at our reporting section. So we've added a decent amount of reports to the point that we actually now have to start grouping them, as we can no longer keep them in a list. That's great. So from a tracking perspective, some of the reports, for example, status history or progress by area, I can go ahead, select my iteration generator report, and lets me know what's done in areas. So for calendar, a lot of points for user management and vacation management. So we can see everything is done and what the original estimates for each of these sections were. And the great part about these reports is I can directly print from here, or if I want to, I can also export to either TIFF, Acrobat, Rich Text, Web Archive, Excel, CSV, or XPS document. From requirements, I can get details, average story size, and average size by area, or estimates versus actuals. From bugs, I also have by area and severity. So I can export content by area. So show me where all the defects are. Now that's critical for a couple of reasons. One, we actually might notice that there's maybe some bad code that's really affecting an entire area. So by taking care of that, we can resolve a lot of problems. Or we can see where a lot of the defects coming from. The defects part of the user management section. And we can begin to ask the questions as to why, what might be going on there. As well as severity. How many critical bugs do we have versus simple bugs and so forth. Overall planning, we have plan versus completed, estimates by area, and team velocity. So for example, in plan versus completed, it lets us know what we planned, what we wanted to deliver, and what was actually at the end of the iteration. Now, lots of times, those numbers will not match. We either can do more or possibly less, and we may want to know as to what happened. So what did we change during the iteration? What was added? Or what did we have to remove or plan but never completed? So we need to know these questions, and that'll help us managers and team members really determine what might be going on and apply the correct apply corrections to it to ensure overall project health. So that is really a lap around TeamPulse. I did want to cover a couple other things, and one of those is the settings. So for example, if you need to manage project team members, you can actually go to the system and select the individuals that you need by simply checking a box. You can edit your template as well. So if you have a specific process template that you guys use, or specific status dates, whether or not you're syncing with TFS or not, you can go ahead and add them here. We do recommend that you save and create a backup of your current one, just in case. And as well, if you are syncing with TFS and you have your own customized template, you can use the advanced settings screen here to match and mimic those specific transitions that you might have to ensure that the data can sync back and forth accordingly. Systems admins will be able to go into the system and edit the email settings to turn on your SMTP notification. So by default, TeamPulse does not come with the SMTP notification turned on. You will have to come in here and specify not just the server itself, any specific ports, or the fact if you use SSL or not. You have to create your TeamPulse host URL. So when it sends the links, it knows where to bring people back to, and who the sender is. And it might be an account like do not reply at my domain, or it might be someone specific like the team member itself. And then some functionality, whether or not you want HTML or plain text emails. Setting up a TFS server, you'll come into the system itself. You can manage your sync servers, so you can have multiple servers from here. So quite simply, click on plus. It's just like connecting Visual Studio to TFS. You'll enter your server name, collection, path, port, as well as the service account in this case that you want to use to synchronize the data. And you can edit your own personal notification settings. So if you're interested in getting notifications, you can say send me when my work items change, so only mine, right? Or current stories and the iteration change, and so forth. So you can apply these settings for your system. Alright, so that is a lap around TeamPulse. Our brand new version, as I said, gives us the new feedback portal and feedback center. A lot of value is you'll be able to communicate and connect with your customers. As well, we have the ability to now not only send the notifications, specify settings for your own notifications, and an updated licensing feature that provides us with forms-based authentication for our portal users. And this concludes this lap around TeamPulse.